Hey, cool kids. Welcome back to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you here joining me this week. And if you're an old friend, welcome back. I really appreciate you tuning in or even watching me over on YouTube. Anyway, I would love to take some time today and hang out with you and explore what it means to be a truly cool grandpa. Now, today's episode has been rolling around in my mind for a little while, and it's about a metaphor I really haven't been able to shake, and one that connects grandparenting with art, specifically with reductive art. Yeah, I know, I get it. That sounds a little highbrow, but stick with me here. We are going to talk about chisels, wood, stone, and what that has to do with sharpening and shaping the hearts and legacies of our grandchildren. Now, as you guys have known for a while, I've had a friend of mine on, Rodney Hopkins, who's a wood carver. Many of his items are really of high value, high quality, and he teaches up here in North Carolina, just across the border from here in Georgia, at the John Campbell Folk School. And he teaches other places as well. And every year I've had the opportunity to see my friend Rodney, who owns Dark Hollow Wood Carving. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding up a custom made spoon that he made out of the logo that's on my website. Now, I'm going to put a link to Rodney's Dark Hollow Woodworking into the show notes so you can check out some of the other work that Rodney has done. And when I went to visit my friend Rodney this last time when he was in North Carolina, it really got me thinking in terms of how, instead of adding to the grandkids, which we do and which we should do, what if we took it around and turned it 180 degrees and really thought about what are some ways that we can take away from the grandkids and really have them shine? And so I wanted to look at this from that opportunity of somebody that works in woodworking or even stone or even, heck, just carving a bar of soap, somebody that's in the reductive art portfolio, let's say. As you know, when people are sitting around, and it's great seeing the folks at the John Campbell Folk School sit there and start to turn a chunk of wood with their hatchets, with their carving knives, start to turn that piece of wood that just, heck, it looks like kindling to me, or it looks like a nice log to throw on the fire. Start to see a face emerge, start to see an animal's presence, start to see interesting and curious shapes that come from that wood. And you know what? I'll ask the question sometimes, how do you know what to carve? And I've often had people that just look up and smile and tell me, Greg, the shape's already in there. I just take away everything that doesn't belong. And that line has really stuck with me over the last few years as I've reconnected with Rodney, as I've interviewed him about the influence of his grandfather. That episode, I'll be sure to put links into the show notes. So you want to check out an Appalachian grandfather and really hear about Rodney's grandfather and living in Southwestern Virginia and what that was like. Anyway, it's come back years later when I was reading and listening to John Maxwell. And John Maxwell talks about that leadership isn't about adding control, it's about releasing potential. And man, that really hit me because so many times I think as parents, as grandparents, as little league coaches, as scoutmasters, as anybody, as we move from that category of youth into adulthood, we oftentimes think about our influence being one of really controlling what's going on. How are we controlling the kids? And I see it at schools and I see it all the time. And I really wonder if maybe we're doing a disservice to the youth by thinking so much about control. But I want us to think about what do we do and how can we do grandparenting if we take a step back and not worry about the control, but think about what we can do to release the potential of that grandchild. And, part of this goes hand in hand with that idea of carving. And it's not about adding more wood or more, stone to a sculpture. No, this is really about finding what is inside that block of wood, finding out what's inside that block of stone, finding out what's inside that bar of ivory soap, and removing everything that doesn't really belong there. When I'm listening to John Maxwell and reading some of his books, one of the biggest takeaways that I think he has in a cornerstone that I would like us to think about in terms of grandparenting is that our leadership is about influence and nothing more, nothing less. It's influence. It's those times where we're sitting near the creek with a pole and a fishing line and our grandkids next to us, and we're just there providing the influence of our presence, the influence of our kind and supportive words, the influence we have to support that grandchild's family when they're in need. It's that kind of influence that means so much to the grandkids. And so, whether you're leading a business, a family, or a curious 8-year-old with a wild imagination, shaping people with influence definitely works better in the long term than trying to control. Now, here's where grandparenting is different from parenting, in my opinion. Parenting, in my opinion, is a lot about being additive. Okay. And so, if we want to think about additive art versus reduction art, additive art would be something like painting on a canvas. It would be something like building up a clay mold that you cast with bronze or something to that effect, right? We take something and then we continually add to it. And we might refine, we might do some taking away, but even with a pencil sketch drawing, you're adding that graphite to the paper. You're making, you're not removing from it. So, being a parent is about teaching, it's about training, it's about setting boundaries, it's about filling in the gaps, it's about teaching the children what they need to know to be able to grow up to be healthy young adults and really move out. Let's face it, one of the most heartbreaking things, but one of the most joyful things is when your kids can leave home, go out, find a job, get an apartment, get some roommates, and really start to exercise their choices and being able to move further from our direct day-to-day influence to being able to direct their own lives, to find their paths. So grandparenting, though, I want us to think about this, is a reductive form of art and a reductive form of love and influence for the grandkids. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't add things here and there and that we don't participate in the teaching, but I want us to challenge ourselves at times to go, hey, are we reducing to show what this awesome potential is within this grandchild? Or are we putting on more and more pressure and more stuff that maybe hides that really awesome potential within the grandchildren? So think about your grandparenting style as something that's really working to uncover what's already there. Maybe we're taking that additive piece of art with those parents, and maybe we're helping to uncover some of the things that maybe needed to be rounded off a little bit, let's say, or there's so much stuff that gets added on in a grandchild's day-to-day life that maybe is not very helpful for them, that maybe grandparents with our influence can help reduce some of that anxiety, can help reduce some of that depression, can help reduce some of those things that maybe have been added on in not positive ways. So let's think about this. Instead of hammering in lessons, we start carving away the fear, the doubt, and pressure. And we start using the patience, time, and unconditional love that we have to reveal that beauty within. And I know I'm going over this a few different times, but I want to make sure that you, as a caring grandparent, really understand and really let this sink in. So let's think about this. We don't make a masterpiece when we do reduction art, we reveal it, right? So, similar to Michelangelo and the David, he gets this big block of stone that nobody's been able to do anything with. And inside of it, over a period of time, he's able to chip away, he's able to polish, he's able to do all this work on this big piece of stone. And then he reveals the David that's inside of that stone. And how fortunate it is for us that we had so many sculptures, and there are so many sculptures out there that can take a block of busted marble or a block of really pristine marble or any kind of substance, and they have the creativity to really see what's inside of it. Now, I want you to keep picturing that sculpture in your mind while we talk through this. And for a moment, I want you to think about all the dust in the air, the rhythm of the chisel striking the stone, the slow emergence of that form. I mean, it takes a long time. And I've been watching a series about castle building, and they focused in on stone cutters. And what was really interesting with stone cutting, along with the stone sculptures, is that these people with the hammer and the chisels, they don't just sit there and, like, I think, just bang away at these things. There's a rhythm to that carving that they find, and there's almost a music that's going on in their mind as they're uncovering that stone. I think it's pretty fascinating how these stone cutters start to think about that art. And it is art, whether it's an ornamental piece that goes above a doorway, or it's the David, or it's Cupid waking Psyche, whatever that form of art is that jumps into your mind. I want you to keep that in mind. But a good sculpture doesn't rush through it. A good carver doesn't force the wood. And the good carver is also going to make sure that the wood is aged properly to be able to take the carving that it does. And being a grandparent is a lot like this. It's slow, it's intentional work. It's built on small, consistent moments. And maybe it's sitting in the bleachers at the high school, at the middle school, baseball game, and you're just there. You're showing up, and you're congratulating your grandchild even when they went 0 for 3. And everybody in the world is kind of down on them because they were at bat at a crucial time, and they know that they feel like they let everybody down. But you're there as a grandmother or as a grandfather to put your arm around them and tell them they're still loved, they're still valued, it'll get better, and they'll have another opportunity to make the game winning hit down the road. So we need to be thinking about how we show up with them. And then also, too, the way that we just listen when they're upset. And instead of fixing it, which would be additive, we just say, that's tough. Tell me more. That's carving. That's being able to let that face, let that feature, let that grandchild come forward and express themselves. Let that grandchild mature a little bit, not by fixing everything, but sometimes just saying, hey, that's tough. Tell me more about it. Tell me what's going through your mind. You're starting to shape the space for that confidence to grow in that young grandchild. Now, one of the things that I love to do is talk about experiences that I had where people really didn't feel like they were going to be good at something, and then they turned the corner. I love that as a scoutmaster. I loved it as a coach. I love it as a teacher. I love it as somebody that just occasionally gets the opportunity to work with kids. One time I had a young man that I had as an SPL for my scout troop. And he became an SPL at a very young age from the within the troop. A lot of people liked him, and to be honest with you, it was probably more of a popularity contest versus an ability affirmation that he could lead the troop. And I was okay with that. The boys had spoken. He, became the SPL, and that's senior patrol leader, if you're not familiar with all the Boy Scout vernacular. And one of the things that he had a really hard time with was trying to lead the troop because he was friends with the other real popular boys in the troop. And you know what? He did not want to assign them cleanup duty, KP. He didn't want to assign them some of the not fun tasks that come out when we do camping trips or troop meetings. And so I had to sit down and I asked him, like, why do you feel like you wanted to be an SPL? And he shared with me that he wanted the experience to learn, to have influence over the troop, to do fun things. And we were able to sit down and talk about that. Yeah, he could have influence over the troop. As the SPL, his input into our planning was super important. He was a voice for the other boys to be able to guide what kind of campouts we went on, what kind of adventures we had, what we were doing. And so, we also talked a little bit about his struggles with leadership. And I get it. 15, 16, 17-year-old boys, they're going to struggle with leadership. Leadership is brand new, and they really see the examples of really, I think, the loud manager types or even the stereotypes that we sometimes have of military, where it's really commanding people to do things. And so we had to sit down and we had to talk about letting go of some of those concepts about that kind of leadership and really talk about the kind of leadership where he's going to have to sometimes make decisions and make assignments for our scout trips where his friends are not going to really like it. I mean, nobody likes to do camp cleanup. Nobody likes to police around the campsite for trash. Nobody really likes doing a few of these activities that are absolutely necessary. So as an adult leader, I had to work with him to get comfortable being able to tell his tent mate and best friend, you've got to go pick up trash. You need to go do something, and then be able to follow through and make sure that that job was getting done. And that was a case where, we could really sit down and I could see his growth because over the next year, as he was an SPL, he really became more confident in being able to make those decisions. And our troop functioned amazingly well once he got past his own hurdle of not wanting to tell other people what to do, especially his friends. And so that was a case of being able to work with somebody to remove some of the bad, let's say, information that he had about how to lead, and then instill in him areas where he could actually have to kind of sell and really cast the vision of how our troops going to work. And that guy ended up becoming a member of the Order of the Arrow. He earned his Eagle. He's a successful entrepreneur and a businessman and has a number of people working under him. And he learned a lot about leadership, a lot about getting people his own age and maybe just a little bit younger, being able to do things that maybe weren't so fun. So, that's just an example that I have where a grandparent, you can sit down and you can listen to your grandchildren and you can help remove some of those things that maybe they've picked up that they don't need, or maybe they've misinterpreted. So I want to talk to you next about what kind of tools do we typically use in carving, right? And I want us to hit on this because we don't really use, and when I say carving, what I mean is how do we really work to reveal our special and unique grandchildren? And so we don't use chisels, we don't use sandpaper, we use our values, our time, and our presence. We talk about, so many different things that come into play that maybe you've heard in management seminars. But when you take a different lens and you put it and you look at it, a lot of these principles are things that we can use as grandparents to really help the grandchildren. So, number one tool that we can use, patience. A sculpture knows that they can't rush. Every chip that they make, every little bit of wood that gets removed changes the whole piece. And as grandparents, we want to make sure that when we remove something, we're removing something that doesn't need to be there. Remember, reductive art is about removing what's not necessary so that we can reveal that art that's within those grandkids. So, as grandparents, our patience tells our grandkids, you matter enough for me to slow down. That means we put our cell phones down. That means we turn the ringer off. That means we take them out for an ice cream and we listen to them. Maybe it's a hamburger. Maybe it's taking them fishing. Maybe it's a short hike around a lake that's close by. But when your grandchildren need you, we show them as a sculptor, that they matter, that we're going to slow down. We are not going to rush through as they start to reveal themselves to us. Number two is perspective. Okay, we've seen a few winters. We've been around the block a few times. Use whatever analogy you want. We know the world won't end if a teenager makes a mistake. And you've heard me talk many times about this concept of non-fatal errors. And I'm not sure where I picked this thing up, but I really like this idea of a non-fatal error. That means it's okay for them to go out and make mistakes and even sometimes make big, big mistakes because they're young enough and maybe the risk and the reward aren't so devastatingly huge that they can't recover from it, even with a little bit of time. And you know what, Grandpa? You know what, Grandma? Sometimes we make non fatal errors as well. And those are opportunities for us to learn, us to take those lessons in. So, but let's get back to the grandkids. All right. So, our perspective lets us bring calm into their chaos. It helps us to be able to not compare and not take over the conversation with the grandchildren, but allows us to share moments maybe when things didn't go well for us, whether they're 6 years old or whether they're 26 years old. Being able to be open and honest and share some of our mistakes, share some of our failures, share some of our challenges. That is sharing our perspective with them. And that's giving them the opportunity to shed or remove maybe some guilt, maybe some embarrassment, maybe some shame that really probably shouldn't be there, or at least not to the degree that they're currently feeling. So, tool number three that we have as grandparents when we're practicing reductive art as a piece of grandparenting is encouragement. Encouragement is that polish that makes the shape shine. I'm holding up the spoon again from my friend Rodney. And what he did with this is that as he finished his carving, as it was sanded down, he added oil to this spoon that really brings out the grains. It really brings out really the uniqueness of this piece of wood and this spoon that he made for me. And, even the marble stone that gets polished up too. It gets sanded with finer and finer sandpaper, finer and finer bits of cloth to really make sure that brings out the art that we see. So with our encouragement, we don't have to lecture. We just have to notice and affirm what's already beautiful about them. So again, we don't have to put, falseness into the kids. I know sometimes we want to. Oh, you're the best basketball player out there. You just had a bad game. Well, sometimes our grandkids aren't the best basketball player out there. However, we can affirm that they've got hustle, that we can affirm that they're going for the ball, every single rebound they're fighting for, everything that they can do that they have absolute control over. We can affirm what's already there and that they're already beautiful and that they're already making such an effort and they're impressing us with their whatever the ability is that we're trying to celebrate. The fourth tool that we have as grandparents is presence. Man, and really this is the most powerful one. This is the one where everybody that's written a grandparenting book sits down and talks about grandma, sits down and talks about grandpa, sits down and talks about when they would sit down and have a big family meal together, or grandpa would be sharing a piece of pie late at night with the grandson or granddaughter. This presence, this tool, is the one that only we can really provide. Mom and dad can't give those grandkids the same presence that we can. This isn't a time to give advice, not give gifts, but it's showing up again and again and again. It's being consistent. One of the things I talk about is that, as grandparenting, it's less about doing more and it's more about showing up consistently. We want to be there for the grandkids as much as we can. And you know what? I get it. We've got a lot of long distance grandparents that listen to this. We have grandparents on different continents from their grandkids. We have grandparents that are down the street from their grandkids, but it feels like they might be a world away. Presence could be a text message. Presence could be just a short little video chat that you have. Presence could be a card that you send that's not a birthday card. You know what I mean? It's something that you show up, you show that you're engaged with. And until they know that no matter what happens that you love them and that they're seen and heard, they're going to struggle a little bit. That presence that you have is really the thing that can bring that piece of art to life. It's what gives you that glimmer of what they're capable of when they're 10 years old and they're being a really snot to their mom and they're causing all sorts of mischief. And you have the opportunity to have that child and you can start to see what that potential is and where they're going, where they could be at 16, where they could be at 26. That starts to show through, but it only shows through with that presence, right? And again, sometimes it's a text message, sometimes it's a card, sometimes it's a short video chat. Whatever that is, your presence means everything to them, and it gives you an opportunity to see what that potential is within that grandchild. Now, I want you to think about what's in your own toolbox for a second. Which tool do you most often use? Do you most often show up and be present? Do you most often provide encouragement or perspective? Or do you most often show up as patience? Which tool do you use the most often? And here's the little kicker. Which one of those tools that I've mentioned for us could use a little bit more sharpening? Which one could use that 1% better this week than you were last week? I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment, whether you're watching this on Facebook, listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you're on the website. I'd love to hear which tool you're going to be working on. As we start to wrap this thing up, even a sculptor eventually has to set that chisel down. And there comes a time when that piece is finished, or at least it's ready to stand on its own. And for some of us, that's going to be really hard. We want to keep shaping, fixing, and protecting. Even as parents, I've got kids that are in their 30s, and I want to keep trying to pour into them and pour into them. And I do. And we have that relationship, but it's becoming different. And it has been different since, they were 13 to where they are now. It's a lot less of that active parenting and a lot more of what I've just been talking about in terms of making sure that what's been revealed through my wife's hard work really gets some fine tuning and polishing, and there's nothing more to add to it. So I want you to understand that I get that at a certain point with grandkids, we need to let them stand up on their own, and they've got to move from being babies to toddlers to little kids to preteens to teens to adults. And each one of those milestones and each one of those phases is going to be a little bit, I don't know, depressing is not the right word, a little bit of questioning, have we done everything we can? And I want you to know, as grandparents, if you're showing up and you're engaged and you're doing these four things, your influence and your legacy is assured. One of the greatest acts of love that we have is to be able to stand back from a sculpture and say, you're ready, you got this, and you're ready for the unveiling. And with kids and grandkids, those words, when they walk across the graduation stage, whether it's kindergarten, high school, college, PhD level, whatever that might be, those words, you're ready and you've got this. Man, those things are powerful, especially coming from grandparents. So I want you to take a look at what your legacy is looking like right now. And I want you to take a look and see where you might be able to think of yourself as a reductionist artist and where you can help take off some of the junk that maybe the world's put on, polish up some of the things that remain, and then see where that art is that's in that grandchild. So, look, I know I've been talking for a while, and this week I want you to consider what you can do to remove rather than what you can add. And I know I just said that, but I wanted it to hit again. What is it that you can remove rather than what you can add? Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for our grandkids is simply clear away everything that hides their light. Think about that. Clear away everything that hides their light. And when we do that, we're not just helping them grow, we're helping shape something that will last long after we're gone. So, grandparenting is like carving. We take away the unnecessary, what doesn't need to be there, right? And we reveal what is pure love and the potential that all of these grandkids have and their uniqueness to reach their potential, not ours, theirs. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's legacy and that's family leadership and that's grandparenting done well. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I know I've been a little bit long. I don't really script stuff out. Some of, I've got some notes and things, but I just kind of want to get out here and share my heart with you. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share, please like and subscribe. If you saw it over on YouTube, same thing over there. Please like, share, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. And if you're curious and want to help out the podcast, the best way to do that is to go to cool-grandpa.us and be sure to check out the bookstore for some fun merchandise. My grandchildren's book is over there. And I want to give a special shout out to Caring Grandparents. They are an excellent site for grandparenting knowledge. Now, Neil Taft is a friend of mine, and I want you to be able to go over there. Check out, I did a blog, which is a lot shorter than this episode, about this idea of reductive grandparenting. And I'll have links to that in the show notes as well. I've been talking for a while, and until we talk again, remember to stay cool.